Alrighty. So, hold on, I'm getting these little AI messages from Zoom that keeps asking me to do stuff I don't want to do. It's a new improved feature. Anyway, all right. So, so tonight, instead of doing our reading, which I usually do from the Bible, we're going to do something a little bit different. And you've probably noticed in the last several days, last couple of weeks, things are getting really intense and lots of insane things are happening. So anyway, I thought I would do something on peace tonight. And this is not from the Bible, actually. This is from Mahatma Gandhi, whose actual name was Mohandas. Mahatma was a title, meaning the Great One, which he never liked, by the way. He never liked people to call him that. So anyway, these are a couple of different readings from Gandhi. They come from, he wrote a book called Discourses on the Gita. The Gita is the Bhagavad Gita means the Song of the Lord, and it's the primary sacred text in Hinduism. There are a number of them, but that's the primary one. And lots of people have written commentaries on it. Gandhi did one as well. Some of these excerpts are from that. And then he also wrote something called either The Way of God or The Way to God. Not sure. But the rest of these are from that, and they're all about peace. So this says, the greatest power in the world is that of the soul. Peace is its highest expression. But to attain that peace, first we must acquire mastery over ourselves. Once we secure an internal atmosphere of peace and calm and goodwill, that will fortify us and bless the others around us. So as we often talk about, and it's always emphasized in spiritual teachings, at least mystical spiritual teachings, that the origin of all those kind of changes is internal first. This is the second reading from Gandhi. Peace requires that first one be brave enough to trust somebody else, and then to love another. Both of those things require faith in oneself. One simply cannot have the strength it takes to remain peaceful if he is continually fighting the internal duel of selfish desires. Good does not result from either evil actions or evil desires. Hence the Gita's central teaching on the oneness of both the means and ends. The practice of peace, in the end, is simply a test of the sincerity of our hearts. It requires a solid, silent, and consistent self-honesty, self-sacrifice, and the willingness to do diligent work. All of this is first realized as arising from within. This is This is another one it's the last one from the Discourse on the Gita. When a stable-minded person sees things as clear as daylight, at the same time, the unstable man is distracted by all the turmoil of the world and becomes as good as blind. On the other hand, what is pure in the eyes of the worldly ones looks unclean and repellent to the stable-minded spiritual one. Rivers are continually flowing into the sea, but the sea remains unmoved by that. In the same way, the sense objects come to one who practices yoga, but he can remain calm like the sea. He becomes free of pride and selfishness and can behave and choose freely. That is the condition of peace. That is the condition of a devotee of God, one who is so established therein that even in his final hour, he finds liberation. And then the last reading is from the Way of God, Way to God. True humility means a most strenuous and constant endeavor, entirely directed to being of service to God and humanity. God itself is continually in action without resting, even for a single moment. So if we truly become one with Him, our activity must become as unwearied as His. Thus, yes, there are momentary rests in store, where the drop is separated from the ocean. This separation is not for the sake of the ocean, which needs no rest, but for the sake of the drop, which does. This is the same case with ourselves. Once we become one with the ocean, that is God, there is no more rest for us, nor indeed do we seek that rest. And yet sleep becomes that rest. Even when we sleep, it is with thoughts of God in our hearts. This restlessness, even in sleep, is true rest, which is essential for peace. The supreme state of total surrender is very difficult for me to describe, but it is not beyond the bounds of human experience, as it has been attained throughout history by many devoted and dedicated souls. May we ourselves learn to attain it. And then this is a very short quote, and I actually am not sure, it's from one of his books, I don't remember which one. Might have been his autobiography, but it says, "Without good thoughts, there is no peace. And without peace, there is no happiness. Happiness is when what you think and what you say and what you do are all in harmony." So I thought those were an interesting set of readings that we would probably do well, to practice in our world. The humility aspect, I want to tell you two short Gandhi stories about the humility aspect. At the time he was leading India's struggle for independence from Britain, they were a British colony at the time, the caste system was still in place in India, and the servant caste were among one of the most lowly, and people were not to touch servants or be in relationship with them other than as an employer. So while they're having one of these international conferences on how to proceed forward with negotiating with the British for their own for Britain for India's independence, they had a servant in this Indian mansion who was waiting on them, bringing them high tea, bringing them tea and snacks and whatnot at 4 in the afternoon. And the servant comes in with this huge tray full of snacks and then teas, and he or she, I forget, is about to bring the tea tray over to the delegates and then bring the snack tray over to the delegates. And as the servant goes over to pick up that tea, Gandhi goes over and puts his hand on their chest and says, if I may. And he picks up the tea tray and serves that to each of the delegates. And then he comes back for the snack tray and serves that to each of the delegates. Not unlike the story of Jesus in the New Testament washing his own disciples' feet. It was intended, as a demonstration of that people who want to be in leadership roles must learn how to be in servant roles, and that there is nothing disgraceful or untouchable about being in that role. The other story about Gandhi, not as well known, is that he had an ashram. He was actually an initiate of Paramahansa Yogananda. He was in the Self-Realization Fellowship and been initiated by Yogananda. But Gandhi himself had an ashram, a place of spiritual study in India. And part of the discipline that he had for his students at that ashram was a morning period of meditation. I believe it was 2 hours long. I'm not sure about that, but it was a longer one. And it took place really early in the morning, at like 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock, like 4 to 6, something like that. It was very early in the morning. And so lots of people were very sleepy, and it was held outside. And so they would come outside and they would all sit, this whole congregation, and meditate in silence for whatever the time frame was. I'm going to say 2 hours, might have been 3. And during that, inevitably, more than one person would fall asleep because they were tired and it was very early in the morning. So as they were sitting, in cross-legged posture of some kind, on mats or on the ground, they would fall asleep. And many of them would, as people do when they fall asleep, snore, which would then disturb other people who were still conscious and meditating. And some of those people complained to Gandhi about, we have people here who aren't meditating, they're just sleeping and snoring. And that's not right, plus it's disturbing, and you should, chastise them for that. So what he did instead of doing that, so that those people would not be embarrassed, was the next day, he, at the beginning of that meditation, said, by the way, I want all of you present here, the moment that you feel the least bit drowsy, even the tiniest bit drowsy, or become aware that you've been distracted from the meditation, even a little bit, as soon as you first notice that, I want you to stand up, because you won't fall asleep standing up. So the minute you get a tiniest bit drowsy, tiniest bit lose focus, stand up for a few moments until you're really awake again, and then sit back down and continue your meditation. And so everybody was, was going to do that, and he said, wait, I'm not done. That's just part 1 of the instruction. Part 2 of the instruction is that the rest of you who don't get sleepy or drowsy at all anytime this morning, periodically stand up as if you were, so that no one will know who really is falling asleep and who isn't. So the attentiveness to not humiliating someone was kind of extraordinary in him. And there are many other instances of that being reported in different settings. but not commonly seen. And and at one point, my last Gandhi story, at one point, a BBC reporter who had been with him in the campaign for a while was doing another interview on the record, to be broadcast, and was talking to Gandhi and about about the brutality of the British in retaliation to some of these peaceful demonstrations of Gandhi's followers, and how Gandhi dealt with that and that sort of treatment, and and Gandhi's response to that was that for there to be peace, it begins in each of us. We all have to cultivate peace within ourselves first, and um, and as he was talking about that, they said, "Well, how can you, who have this peace apparently inside, have so much patience for your adversaries, for the British, and the way they sometimes treat you and your followers?" And Gandhi said, "It's easy to be patient with them because the problem is they're struggling with their own internal devils, not with us. And I know how difficult that struggle is because I fail at it all the time. So it's easy to be patient." Another example of his self-honesty and his humility, I think. And then the last, I guess I said that was the last one, but I was wrong. This is the last one. If you watch the movie Gandhi, you'll be familiar with this one, another well-known one. But there was a time they were having a very large meeting, and it was after another British atrocity against the Gandhi followers. And they weren't all atrocities. I mean, there were many British who treated them very well, many British officers, but there were instances of that. Anyway, this was after one of those instances, and the Indian crowd was meeting, and they were very, very upset, and tempers were high already. And at that time, the British officers and Indian policemen who served the Britons came into the hall to kind of make sure it didn't get out of hand. And when they entered, everybody got really upset. And it was, tensions were really high and escalating, and it was not going to be a good situation. And so Gandhi went up to the microphone and asked everybody to be quiet for a moment. And he said to his followers, "My brothers and sisters, the British are not our enemies. Their injustice is. And once they realize how unjust they're being, they will stop it." So he was really clear about not making his adversary his enemy and then dubbing his enemy as evil and needing to be destroyed. Another lesson that, to my mind, would be really helpful in today's climate. To be fair, the other thing I have to say on the subject of peace is that most people I've met in spiritual circles, especially these kind of more mystically, inwardly focused ones, that most people I've met in those circles tend to be very idealistic, which has a very positive aspect to it, obviously. They tend to believe in people, they tend to believe peace is possible, they tend to try to see the best in people, try to give people second chances and all of that, which is admirable. And so they tend to adopt approaches that are kind-hearted and compassionate and always nonviolent, as Gandhi did. And the power of that's really phenomenal. Martin Luther King Jr. Used many Gandhian tactics and tried to, I think he failed in some ways succeeded, but he tried to model his movement on the Gandhian movement in India. Of course, his focus was civil rights for people of color, not national independence, but using those tactics. However, the reality of the world as it is that there also needs to be the realistic approach to peace that recognizes that there are people and groups in the world that will see any of our gestures of peace as weakness and opportunities to attack us, even violently and with violence. As you probably know, World War II had ended very shortly before Gandhi's campaign in India to free India. And so it was very present in people's minds. Most of us are old enough to have parents who lived through that. My children, and certainly my grandchildren, it's not even on their radar anywhere. It's so far, it's like ancient history. It's like the Civil War, the Revolutionary War, or the Maccabean War or something. It's just so far away, it's not even real to them. And the potential of the world being enslaved is just totally not realistic to them. But it was very present in the time of Gandhi. And this, I believe it was the same BBC reporter, but I know it was a BBC reporter. And I was interviewing him again and said, so these tactics, this ahimsa movement, meaning nonviolence or harmlessness, this ahimsa movement, would it have worked against the Nazi regime? Would it have worked against Hitler? And Gandhi said, absolutely not. For a nonviolent approach to peace to work between adversaries, both adversaries must be moral. And the moral center of their value system and their life and culture must be present, or it won't work. So that's a piece that's often, because it's an uncomfortable piece, frankly, that's a piece that's often left out of our understanding and our attitudes and our approaches. And sometimes it results in really sad things that happen because people get really hurt, assuming that someone else is going to behave morally and reasonably. So that's not to say those situations are hopeless, but even Gandhi said there needed to be different approaches with that, and that those approaches are sometimes not easy to do, but that ultimately the goal is to foster and engender and educate in such a way that morality is promulgated and begin to be diffused amongst more of the population, including those populations that don't have it, and that would be a foundational work prior to his kind of movement, before that could really work, before it could really be possible. But he believed very strongly in the British Empire that it was a moral empire, that their foundations were moral, that the foundations of Western civilization basically came out of the Jewish code of ethics and the Jewish laws in the Bible, and then somewhat from some of the things in India and Egypt as well, but that most of the Western code of civilization is founded in what was originally Jewish ethics, and that people who still support that, whether they support Judaism or not, is not the issue, but whether they still support those values, which are also Christian values, that's foundational in establishing a peaceful, civilized society, if that breaks down and disappears, especially in large groups of people, then it's not possible to operate in the same way that it could have been possible. So the solution to our peace is this inner work that we need to do. And that's not dependent upon our worldly situation or our national situation or our international situation, not dependent on that. Some of the greatest teachers who have ever lived and the greatest proponents of peace who've ever lived in times or countries that were not at peace or safe at all. But so it's definitely possible. But that inner work for us is essential. But the outer work of how we establish that in the world is not as simple as let's be nice to everybody and they'll be nice back to us. Sadly, it's not. Many people, I believe, the vast majority of people, that will work with. But there are certainly individuals and groups that at present that would be a highly dangerous position for you or me to take, because there isn't any, what we think of as that core morality in everybody is not. Is the potential for that in everybody? I certainly believe it is. Do they all start with having that as an accessible state of consciousness to them? Again, I think yes. But people make choices, and they can make choices so often, so long, and so habitually that at some point they lose their choice. Kind of like an addict. Addicts don't start with no choice. No addict starts with no choice. Whether they're addicted to cigarettes or fentanyl, or sex or whatever they're addicted to, no addict starts with no choice. They start making choices. And as they make choices long enough in certain directions, eventually, unless there's some kind of intercession that helps get the drugs out of their system, they don't have choice anymore. That free will they have used to enslave themselves. And unless there's some kind of interdiction that happens that really gets the effects of those substances out of their system, they don't have free choice anymore. So we can do the same thing with morality. We can choose evil so often that the option for good is not present anymore, which is a scary thing to think about. But it's the world, it's part of the world we're facing. And all of the great teachers of the world who promoted and talked about peace also were honest about that and talked about how it takes great courage to face that, because there need to be ways that we approach that where we contain people. Just in terms of, you don't let, at a very different level, but children who are behaving very badly and endangering other children or themselves, usually and hopefully words will work to curtail that and contain them and redirect them and educate them. Usually, but sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes there needs to be physical restraint and physical things imposed upon those children to protect them or others around them. So societies need to do that as well in whatever ways we do, and that's a real challenge. How do we do that ethically, morally? How do we do it, in a way that doesn't turn us into one of the terrible people? So it's a struggle, and I think there are real struggles in the world that we need to be facing, but I think many of the situations that are causing the outrage and anger and violence in people are not real situations. They're opinions, for God's sake, and they're inflamed by people who have agendas. So part of our peace, for me at least, and probably for you, I hope, part of our peace is alternating between engaging the world as it is and disconnecting from the world as it is, so that we create some distance between it and us, so that we are not constantly flooded with images of, thoughts of, opinions of, agendas of, um, all of the stressors that we experience just as a human being in the world, let alone all the stressors of our societies and our nations, and all their conflicts. Living in the world is an important part of our spiritual journey. Also, withdrawing from it is an important part of our spiritual journey. Not withdrawing from it permanently, but taking breaks. Shabbat is one such break, where you take a break every week from engaging with the world and your responsibilities in the world, and instead begin to focus on those things that nourish and sustain and restore your soul and your vitality, that are basically things of love and that create love in you and that allow you to express love. And then when we're kind of recharged, we can re-engage the world and bring that love present. But if we are in the world too long, so to speak, in its current state, and which has been its state for a long time, it's very easy to get overwhelmed, to feel the weight of it, to feel the negativity of it, to feel the despair of it, and to get caught in that web, which doesn't do the world or us any good. So setting parameters for your peace can be really helpful. I don't know what those would be for you, but just to give you a quick example of what I mean before we go into some meditation. You might choose, let's say that you choose a time to have dinner with your family, 6 o'clock to 7 o'clock in the evening, whatever. And that's your time just to be together with the family. Not to deal with work, not to deal with expenses, not to deal with your neighbors, not to deal with politics, not to deal with the world, not to deal with the money, not to deal with any of that. Just to be with your family and spend some time together. So at 6 o'clock, you sit down to dinner and your phone rings. And instead of leaping up to answer the phone, you let it ring, or you turned it off before dinner, so you don't even know it's ringing. And that hour is a sacred hour that is not to be intruded upon. Or you decide to practice Shabbat in whatever form of observance you do with it. You set aside a day a week that you're not going to be doing. You're not going to be paying bills. You're not going to be cutting your lawn. You're not going to be working. You're not going to be looking at news. You're not going to be stressing about your responsibilities or the world around you. You're going to do those things that really nurture the love in you. Reading, walking, meditating, writing, dancing, being with your friends, playing with your grandchildren, studying, meditating, whatever those things are. You're doing those things. But you're putting up a fence between you and the world, so to speak, to have a little distance from it, so that its effect is severely mitigated on you for that time. And maybe another way you do that is that you periodically do something really fun, not even necessarily be called spiritual, but that's lighthearted and carefree, because many of us don't have carefree lives anymore. And some of us did, maybe as a child or maybe at other phases. Maybe you are now, I hope. But cultivating that sense of carefreeness, not being worried and burdened, is an important thing too. And that might not be something that looks spiritual. That might be something of saying, hey, let's get a couple friends and go see a good funny movie. Or hey, let's all go out to dinner tonight. Or hey, let's all make dinner at my house tonight. Or whatever it might be. Or maybe go on a mini vacation or even a long vacation. But setting parameters where it's like, nope, that's far enough, world. That's far enough. And then setting parameters of in here, these are things that bring me joy. These are people that bring me joy. These are people that I love. These are things I want to connect with. These are things I want to have time to do because they're fun, they're enriching, they're fulfilling. I'm not going to sacrifice my peace, my fulfillment, my enjoyment of life because of my obligations in the world or my anxieties about the world. I'm not going to do it. And when I find myself doing it, I'm going to put up the fence again and say, oh, wait a minute. This fence needs mending. We're going to put this one back up a bit. So they're not brick walls. They're not impenetrable. They're friendly picket fences that you can see through and talk over, but they're still fences so that when you need the space, you can take the space. So I don't know if any of that relates to you or not, or connects with you or makes sense to you. I hope it does, but it certainly does for me, and it's kind of been a sanity saver for me to recognize that everybody doesn't have the same outlook on peace and morality that I do, and to recognize that because of that, I need to set up my own parameters to keep myself sane without completely disregarding or disengaging from the world, but having this sort of alternating current of I'm very present and involved, I'm restoring and focused in this flow of the divine now and not focused in the flow of the world. Now I'm present again, now I'm giving myself some space again. And that ebb and flow is really kind of built in to the rhythm of our life anyway. So it's kind of finding a flow that works for you in this particular regard. Okay, so enough of all that. Time to put up the fence, take a little distance from the world, bring your attention inside. And just begin to, for a moment, call to mind all those things or activities or places or people that bring you joy, that give you space to relax and be at ease, to not be on duty, so to speak. To contemplate for a moment all those things that you find soothing and uplifting and enriching, whatever they are. To begin to, as you remember those people and activities and places that bring you that deep sense of connectedness, that deep sense of well-being, as you remember those, pay attention to what we might call the energy of that, or the aura of it, or the vibration of it. Some non-tangible but real essence of deep well-being and peace and contentment. Look inside the people and the activities that bring those feelings to that actual dynamic essence itself. And begin to focus on allowing that essence of peace, that essence of deep-seated, well-anchored well-being. Let that energy or spirit begin to move more freely within your consciousness and more freely within your physical body. And as we all face whatever life brings us, let us have a place that we can find inside this reservoir of undisturbed peace. Of a love with no bounds. Of a timeless carefreeness. That we can drink from within ourselves that will nourish and strengthen our soul and give us respite from all those troubles we carry so often. May we spend these next few silent moments cultivating that inner dynamic, that inner presence of peace. So let's just begin to slowly bring our attention back once more. Have you ever dreamed of a world at peace, of finding one to love, in whom you could believe? Have you ever longed for a heart of grace, of knowing you belong, hand in hand and face to face? Then know somewhere there's a place for you, and when you come, I will be there too, waiting and still loving you. Does it ever seem there's too much misery, too many good who die, not ever knowing why? And do you ever wish that you could start again, take back what's been done, try to make amends? Life's too fast, there's no time to waste. Share your love, do not hesitate. One by one, the world is saved. So some of you in the local area we will be seeing tomorrow at Bill and Jan's house for one of our potluck gatherings. And if you are not attending that but are in the area, I'm also the guest speaker at Unity this Sunday morning at 10:30. And a quick, again, reminder that Unity services are recorded and put up on their Unity of Fort Wayne YouTube channel. You can look at any of the Sunday services they've done. Also, these inner hours are recorded, except for the interactive ones. These are recorded and put up on One by One's YouTube channel, which just is these, just a recording of these, in case somebody missed it and wants to see it, or wanted to see one again for some reason. Anyway, hopefully I will see some of you tomorrow and some of you at this coming Sunday at Unity. For those who live out of area, thanks for joining us for these. And we've been talking about seeing if we can maybe do something else online for the people out of area as well, in addition to these. Um, we have a couple of other projects in the works. So we'll see how that develops. We'll let you know. There's always the things that you see that we do, and then there's always things that you don't see that we do, like working on some books that we're working on right now and working on a new program idea and whatnot. So as they come to fruition, if they do, we definitely will let you know. And in the meantime, thank you for being present tonight with us. Thank you for the blessings that you provide in our life and in many lives, I'm sure, that yours touches. May this be a week of strength and good health, recovery from whatever we may need to recover from, and of that deep sense of well-being that is accessible to us, even in our times of stress in the world. But may this be a week of less stress than you expect, and greater joy and greater fulfillment, and perhaps a willingness, if you need to, as I do, create some of those distances from time to time that give you a little breather from the weights of the world. So I hope you have a wonderful week, and I hope I see some of you this weekend, and some of you again, many of you again next Friday. So thank you for everything. And thank you very much, those of you who have a habit of regularly contributing to One by One financially to help us out. You're why we're still able to do these. So we are deeply appreciative of that. We may not say it often enough. I don't want to kind of fixate on money and talk about it too much, but some of you are regularly doing that, and it makes a big difference, and we are very grateful for it and never take it for granted. So thank you for that as well. All right, I'm going to stop the recording and say good night, and see you soon, I hope.